Southeast Queens, our chairman of the Environmental Protection Committee, Councilmember Costa Constantinides. Yes. Did I get it right?
I got it.
All right. Now I want
you
y'all to try to say his last name. Three times in a row. Let's see what happened with in the past. And we also are joined by Councilmember Donique Miller from Southeast Queens. We also are joined by some civic associations, joined by Manny Kaufman, who is representing Alicia Hyman's office, Ernie Flowers representing Senator Leroy Comrie's office, Jackie Campbell, Rosedale Blocks Association, and our new president of the Rosedale Civic Association, Marcia O'Brien. And you're representing the two Rosedale, but what block association? 244th Block Association. So listen, it's been no secret that communities like Rosedale, literally where we stand, are inundated with flooding every time it's a simple rain in Southeast Queens. For far too long, residents on this block have had to deal with promises by the city that they were going to address the outstanding infrastructure issues in our community. Let me tell you what this means for seniors, for working families. In communities like this, every time it rains, there's water that enters people's basements. What does that mean? That means I have to take money out of my own pocket to flush out my basement. Money that could be going into my mortgage, money that can go into buying food and medicine, especially for our seniors in this community. And the quality of life is destroyed because in a community like this, they built up, but the pace of building out homes here was never kept up with infrastructure behind it. And it's shameful that in 2017 that communities like this, and I know we were in Puerto Rico a few years ago, they were communities in Puerto Rico just like this, that every time it rained, they were literally underwater. So, working with my colleagues in the council, our chairman Costa, my colleague from Southeast Queens, Donique Miller, we really went to the mayor and said, we need to address this issue. We no longer want to hear talk about we're going to solve this issue. We need to see tangible results for communities like this. And out of that, for the $1.7 billion investment for Southeast Queens, which is historic by any means. It's the biggest infusion of money that this community has seen probably over the last 20 or 30 years when it comes to infrastructure investment. So we're very happy and we celebrated that, and I do want to say we see a lot of new work going on in our communities. Hook Creek Boulevard project just started. I know former Rosedale Civic President worked very hard on that. So we're elated. Work is going on in Cambria Heights. Work is going on in Rosedale. Work is going on in St. Albans and other areas. So we're finally starting to see results after all of these years. But even as we celebrate those results, we know that accountability and transparency are two key words in getting this work done over the next decade or so as we build out the infrastructure investment here. And one way to make sure, even as we trust DEP and DDC to get this work done, one way to ensure it is getting done is by ensuring that the public, one, is knowledgeable about what's going on. Because our offices, let me tell you, on any day it rains like we saw last week and over the weekend, we're going to get inundated with the calls. And while constituents, I would like to believe, trust us, they've been told the same story for the last 20 years. We're going to get to your block. We're going to solve this issue. So now, out of the legislation that we passed and that the mayor signed into law, we're happy to announce today that there will be a public reporting database that now goes online for the public to see what's going on in their neighborhoods. And most importantly, accountability comes with the $1.7 billion that we're talking about. So you'll know that there's a $30 million project coming down the line for your neighborhood, like a neighborhood like this. And guess what? We didn't stop and say, this job is done, is going to be done this year. We only want you to track it for 1 year. This bill requires that this database is kept up to date for the next 15 years as they build out the infrastructure, which is a big deal. But we didn't stop there. We then said we want to make sure that there's a report drafted yearly to keep the public up to date, and in particular our community boards and our local civic associations. So the law requires that now DEP and DDC also send a report to the community boards once a year, to our civic associations, and to their elected official offices. So this is the way we bring that accountability that this community deserves. We are taxpayers. Last I checked, we're in New York City, and we shouldn't be treated like we're in a third world country, and no third world country deserves to be treated that way as well. Let me be clear that primarily you see this in communities of color. Every environmental justice issue that you can think of, whether it's the airport, whether it's infrastructure, it seems to be lacking in communities of color. So this is an environmental justice issue as well. So I've spoken long enough. We're joined by two colleagues who really stood shoulder to shoulder with us as we did this. And I'm going to call up first my colleague from Southeast Queens, Danique Miller, who I could not have done this without, who has been an avid fighter in ensuring that his community gets their just share of funding. And there's no one that could deny that work is being done in his district, because we share literally almost share a district. And so on my block, like, there's work that started, and I don't need anybody to write a report that Richard's got work done on his block, pushing for himself. No, these projects, let me be clear, a lot of these projects have been on the books for the last 30 years. So the project extends literally like near my block going into Danique's block almost. So I can literally look down his block and see work being done, and look down my block. But this should not be panned out as some sort of conspiracy. All right? So I want to welcome my colleague, Danique Miller, and thank him for his leadership in getting us here as well. Danique Miller.
Thank you, Councilmember Richards, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. It has been relentless during your time as the chair. Obviously, as you said, that this was an issue for the last half century, and quite frankly, when this community was different and was not welcome back here, there was still flooding back here in Rosedale. And so, as you said, the infrastructure has not kept up with the times. I myself, and it is not just Rosedale, it is Southeast Queens that has been a problem. As I stand here, I'm reminiscing of 1990, I want to say 1 or 2. My wife and I, we looked at a house. I can see it from how night we looked at the house, and we were absolutely amazed at this home. And was amazed at the price for even 1992. We were so amazed that we ran home, we got our parents and came back, and not only did the plane almost knock you down, but that afternoon it had rained, and then you saw why. And that kind of takes you away. Right? And you didn't know that people would live like that. That was it's kind of reminiscent of what you see in the Midwest and the South and so forth. You talked about the town in Puerto Rico that's eluded me now, that we've been fortunate of visiting last year. And they certainly had a similar problem with infrastructure, but they did not have the resources to pump and do some of the things that we can do here. And so because of that, it was a major health hazard. Make no mistake about it, this is a health hazard. So I thought I was escaping it here, and I bought a home in Cambridge Heights a few years later, and in 20 years, I did my basement 3 times. And the mold creates certainly a health hazard, but it certainly undermines the value and the peace of mind and the quality of life. And so we certainly deserve better. I want to thank folks like Rosedale Civic that have been relentless for decades. Folks like Randy Carter and me that have been on there for nearly a half a century. That's really exactly right? And finally, this has happened. And so if we raise our voice loud enough, and obviously during 4 years ago we raised that voice, and the #1 issue in Southeast Queens, quality of life, was around the flooding, right? So I think all the elected and folks citywide know that that's an issue. And because of that, we were able to get the ball across the finish line and actually get those funds here. Historically, more than half the budget DEP. But what's more important is this legislation that creates the accountability and the transparency that ensures that the job will get done from beginning to end. And that is so important. Jobs get started, they don't get finished. They don't get finished in the appropriate way. They're not doing what they were intended to do. We can, through the online portal, we can see, and more importantly, the public now will be able to access this information. And it's also an inconvenience sometimes when someone shows up at the door the day before and sits a note on the door saying that the water's going to be off for this time for the next 3 days or the next week. Or if your car isn't off the street, you're going to move. You have to make provisions. You have to make provision for the allotted amount of time. Then you need to know that the time that they say they're going to start, they say that the date that they're going to finish is actually consistent, along with the other things. And so this is very, very thoughtful legislation. I'd like to thank again Councilmember Richards and Constantinides for their vision and their thoughtfulness around this, along with Council Members Will and Ulrich, who've also really been an integral part of this. And the community, the Southeast Queens community, is certainly going to be better off because of it. We are going to enjoy a quality of life that most have taken for granted, right? It's like having bad transportation here, that it's going to take you 2 hours to get to and from. We have become culturally conditioned. And I'm going to leave you, I remember the rain like we had a few days ago that we may get tonight, and it's just so somber and it puts you to sleep, and it's a beautiful, peaceful sleep, right? And then you jump up like, oh my God, let me check the basement. You open the door like this.
Thank you, Chief.
And then I'm not coming into pumping water. And time again, that has been what we've had to go through here in Southeast Queens. And because of the investment and because of this legislation, we're going to be relieved of that, and the flood will be mitigated, and the quality of life that we so richly deserve will come to this community. And Councilman Richards said it so aptly and so appropriately. Communities of color are often disproportionately impacted when it comes to environmental justice. So this is a small battle. We still have to deal with waste transfer and the other things that impact Southeast Queens. But I am proud to say that there are folks in this community that are absolutely on the front line of environmental justice. It is not someone else's issue, it is our issue, and we're standing up and standing behind that. So I thank you again for your leadership. I thank all of the civics and the community boards that have supported this. It is the teamwork that makes the dream work. There are no one individuals or one entity, whether it's the council or the local community boards or the local organizations. It is everyone working collaboratively to make sure that this has been a success. So I look forward to this legislation. Portal actually up.
Not yet. Yeah.
It should be up and running
after this fiscal year.
Yep. And I did speak to IT, and they're working on it. We actually were fortunate to have someone who lives in this and is a part of that team as well. So I look forward to this legislation really moving forward and doing what it says it's going to do, that everyone can track that information real time, and so when it rains, we don't have to feel it. Because we know what you know. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I also just want to acknowledge we were joined by the inspector of the 105. Maybe we'll keep him for the 116. I don't know. Or maybe Cooper. I don't know what's going to happen here. We have the best of both worlds here. Inspector Chips, I want to thank you for joining us as well. I now want to bring up a gentleman from the other side of the earth who's really been a champion of environmental justice, a champion for Southeast Queens, and not just Southeast Queens, the city as a whole. I had the honor of chairing the Environmental Protection Committee before he did. So I literally just warmed the seat a little bit, but he's made the seat hot. And he passed some real significant legislation, which on the global scale for the city and for the country and for the world, actually. Because whatever we do in New York City, the world looks to. And he passed some significant legislation to reduce carbon emissions 80% by 2050 in New York City, which set a standard for the rest of the country almost. And he continues to fight for not only our quality of life, but against global warming as a whole across New York City and the world. And I want to bring to you none other than a man that took me a year to learn how to say his last name. But I got it right finally, after a lot of practice. Councilmember Costa Constantinides.
So I go more like Costa, more like Madonna or Cher, I just like the one name, you know. But it's my honor to be here with you today, and I just want everyone to know the advocacy that the two council members from Southeast Queens, Isaac Miller and Donovan Richards, sponsors of this bill. I may live on the other side of Queens, but I'm speaking with them and hearing about these issues here in Southeast Queens. You can't be a resident of Queens and not know about the structural and environmental justice issues here in South Queens. You have such strong advocates in the council every day that are talking to us and saying this needs to be addressed. It's time. I remember working for Jim Gennaro and meeting with DEP. Amanda Kaufman was there.
Yes.
on the flooding issues here. Because most of us, when it rains, as Danique talked about and Donovan talked about, we think about, do we have an umbrella? We think about, how are we going to get home? We want to get wet. We don't think about, our homes, our families. Our kids going to get sick from the mold in the basement? Mm-hmm. What is this going to cost me for it to rain today? Mm-hmm. What is it going to cost my car? I mean, I see this car here sitting in the mud here. A couple of days ago, I know that had to be, Donovan was saying this was a pool. So what's it going to cost me to fix my car when the underbelly of it gets flooded? What's going to happen in my neighborhood? What's going to happen? How am I going to get to school, my kids across this street if there's a pool? How are we going to get across here and not get hit by a car or the cars that are coming down on Brookville Road here? So these are real structural issues that are environmental justice. And you have two strong advocates here that have never wavered, have never said we're going to give up, never going to say that we're going to take a half a loaf. The $1.7 billion is a historic amount of money. And this bill, government is big. Government is huge. And making sure that year by year, there's a portal where residents can go for 15 years. It's easy for things to get lost in a big government, right? I mean, we're a huge government of lots of different agencies working together. But residents can know what's happening on their block in real time. Community boards and civic associations, you've continued this fight every single day, making sure that your communities get your fair share, the share that you deserve. You deserve to make sure that you shouldn't have to worry about these types of issues. Your home's the biggest investment you're ever going to make. You shouldn't have to worry about whether or not your basement is going to be flooded, whether I have to sell my home because my basement is getting flooded. So I'm proud to stand with amazing public servants like Donovan Richards and Isaac Miller who fought to get this money. I'm proud to stand with the civic associations and the residents who have never taken no for an answer. And I'm proud to do my little part as chair of the committee to make sure that this bill moves forward. And as the years go by, after we're out of office, right, because nothing lasts forever, we're going to we're only going to be a council member for this long, but we're going to make sure the impact on these communities are for the long haul. That you can say we all accomplished something together. We work together, that's when things That's how government's really supposed to work. So I thank you all for having me here. I appreciate your indulgence for me being a little bit late and getting lost.
No, it's okay.
And I'll turn it back over to really the stars of the council, Denise Miller and Donovan Richards.
We like public servants. Let me just point out, too, just 2 fun facts. I will be close to 50 years old by the time this bill is no longer in play. I just wanted to put that out there. Why are you laughing, Denise?
Tell that story.
Oh, so Denise, I'll tell that story later. I am now going to turn it over to our Rosedale Civic Association president, Madam President, and as I said the other night, we didn't get Hillary, which was unfortunate.
But we're with her.
But we got the First Lady President, and we are with her all the way.
We're with her.
First Lady President who's broke the glass ceiling right here in Rosedale. None other than Madam, who represents this area actually as well, lives in this area. My president, Miss Marcia O'Brien. Don't be
It's
shy.
been a long time waiting. So it finally has arrived. One of the challenges we've always had was ensuring that checks and balance is always in place. So knowing that this is here today, I look forward to the day when our council member can stand in front of our civic association and our community board and get us connected to this portal, so that we can go through the community and just basically give confirmation to the residents that you can now check it's really happening, and we can actually give them a break. We don't have to constantly call them, but just us holding everyone accountable. This is amazing. We're grateful. We're so thankful for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for Rosedale Civic. Ernell Stephan. And I also want to acknowledge William Scarborough, who did a lot of work for a very long time around this issue. And we believe in definitely, and continues to, but we like to give credit where it's due. We are building on the foundation of what many people did before our time. I also just want to point out property values, and I think Danique hinted at this, how property values are also affected by the lack of infrastructure in these communities, and how communities like this, you know, as you buy a home, you're building wealth, right? Generational wealth. You want to pass down these properties to your children. But I know property values for a fact are affected by the lack of infrastructure in these communities as well. And also just the other underlying issue, how these floods can also set you back into foreclosure. If you can't afford your mortgage, you miss that payment because you have to flush out your basement, you could end up in foreclosure as well. So there's a direct tie between economic justice, environmental justice as well, as it relates to this topic as well. All right, we'll take any questions from the press.
I have a question about, are there any details on how that portal will work?
So it's still being built out now, the portal, but it's going to be, and what we're going to want to see as we work through with DEP and DDC on the tracking portal is a very user-friendly model, which enables the public to go on, put their block in. And DDC, to their credit, has a portal now, but I'm not happy with it. It's never really never updated the right way. But DEP helps us in one sense to keep that accountability there. So we'll be working through the kinks to make sure it's very user-friendly. It's being built out, as you can imagine. The law it was just signed into law last week or 2 weeks ago. So as we move forward, we'll be coming back to the community to brief them on it. I'm sure we'll be having some sessions with the community on how to use it. But I anticipate it to be very user-friendly and very easy, even for seniors to use as we move forward. And if people don't have access to internet, our offices will certainly be happy to open up the doors to ensure people can come in and check the portal as well.
I have just a quick follow-up question for the council.
Yes.
By any chance, do you know of any other communities that are facing this issue?
large area of Southeast Queens that does not have real infrastructure, right? I mean, you have catch basins, there's entire communities without real infrastructure. You see a block or two that may not have the right infrastructure. You have entire communities here in Southeast Queens that have been historically underserved by DEP, not having the infrastructure in place. And this is really an environmental justice and an issue for these neighborhoods that have seen for decades not having the infrastructure in place to get what they need from the city when it comes to flooding. So, I mean, we talked about before, Donovan and Denise talked very aptly about the property values and the issues of owning your home and seeing your home going into foreclosure. These are real tangible issues for the residents of Southeast Queens. So this bill helps make government smaller. Government's big, but this helps make it small that we can understand what's happening block by block, community by community, to ensure that the dollars that were brought home are constantly being spent in the way that needs to be spent. It's 1.7 billion is a lot of money, but you want to make sure how you keep track of it block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, and that everyone together understands the plan. Because when everyone understands the plan together, we know where we're going. We have a map, we know to get there. So that's really what this is all about.
So, if I could also add, there are communities throughout the city, and Canarsie, exactly, Canarsie, and the rest of the Jamaica Bay line that we're seeing, and whether or not, and those communities were developed without, as in this one, without the type of necessary infrastructure to support it. But when we were kind of going through the conference, remember that there was a lot of conversation about they thought how I mentioned how thoughtful this piece of legislation was, and everyone in there said, well, I'm having work too. I want to be a part of it.
Exactly. There were a lot of requests.
And the fact of the matter is, there has not been $1.7 billion spent, and that's far different from you having one or two projects, maybe even having, $100 million or $50 million, which is a lot of money, but it's limited to a single project or two. This, because it's spread out, the size, multitude, certainly the magnitude of the money made it necessary. Legislation important and groundbreaking is because of the accountability aspect of it, right? And it's like when we did the Intro 495, which is the waste transfer. It's called waste transfer equity for a reason. Because that we knew that we were setting a template for legislation and how services get delivered throughout the city, right? That it was always going to be done equitably. And so we titled it that. And when we tackled this issue, it's also a matter of equity throughout the city. And we just introduced a package of fair share legislation. And that is all about how services, good and bad, and deliverable, get delivered in the city, right? Some bad stuff, but not necessarily, but just things that we don't want, right? The shelters, the mental health facilities, and all those things that we get overburdened with. But then the good things, like the libraries, the precincts, and the schools, we're less on the receivable end. So equity is very important. We deemed that and termed that equity, and this is about equity as well. Right? And so that's kind of been the mission and the mantra going on to this. However services get delivered throughout the city, it was going to be done in an equitable fashion. That we were going to have the same quality of life that folks in Manhattan and other places did, and that's been our thing.
And let me be clear, we're here today for a particular reason. This neighborhood, there have been so many broken promises to this community. So many broken promises. So this neighborhood here is why we passed legislation like we did last week. Because we want this community to know that when we give our words, not just because at the end of the day, I stopped coming to this neighborhood to tell them work is going to begin. Because they've heard it for the last 30 years. And even as an elected official, I get frustrated because how can I look them in the eye year after year and say, well, work is going to begin. Work is going to begin. Okay, we've heard it before. I go door to door. Work is going to begin. So this portal lets them know that the conversation is no longer a conversation, and we're putting words into action. And next summer, Next summer is when the big project, we did some minor paving over here, but that's when this project will break ground. This is around a $30 million project as well. So that level of accountability, not just for DEP, but even as elected officials, we want to be held accountable, but there's only so much we can do. You know, if I could come here and bring a jackhammer and do it myself, I would do it, but I don't have that specialty. So this level of legislation and investment lets them know that we are serious about getting this work done as well. All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none, I want to thank everyone for coming out. We have a long way to go. We have a long way to go. But I do want to say, and I do want to thank DEP and DDC. Jim Roberts has retired. That's why so much work is being done. You didn't hear me. He has retired. You could say it. So there is a shift in the culture in DEP and DDC now, and you can clearly see it on our streets. May you enjoy your retirement, sir. Thank you all for coming out.